Not okay, then I'll start over. So namaste, I'll begin with the peace chant. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha Harihi Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryangaravavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. May that divine reality protect us both, teacher and students. May that sustain us both. May we grow strength together. May our study be vigorous and illuminating. May there be no ill will amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So now the topic is the nature of meditation. Let's see, the actual title is Yoga Techniques to Calm the Mind. And so I will speak about the yoga tradition of meditation, but I'll also speak in a broader sense about meditation in general. So let me begin with what Patanjali says about the 3 stages of meditation. Remember in the last session, on yoga, the last yoga session, I spoke of pratyahara, pulling the mind back from the senses. And so that actually is the foundation for the meditation practices. Patanjali doesn't consider it a meditation practice in itself, though the Buddhists did, if we equate pratyahara with mindfulness. But for Patanjali, it was the beginning of, or it was the preparation for higher meditation, which for him begins with dharana. So in his 3rd chapter, the Vibhuti Pada, the 3rd chapter on special powers attainable through yoga, he begins it with the Sutra 1, which says, Desha bandhas kittasya dharana, which means that dharana is fixing the mind to one place. Now that's an interesting definition and a very useful definition also, but it requires a little explanation. What does it mean to fix the mind to one place? Desha bandha, fixed to one place. Chittasya, of the mind. Dharana is dharana, or concentration. So dharana is concentration. When we say I'm going to meditate, what most of us mean is not that I'm going to enter dhyana, which we'll see the next level is an actual state. But dharana is a practice where we try to fix the mind to one thing, and after a moment the mind wanders away. And then we catch it, we bring it back and put it back there again. It stays for a second or two, it begins to wander, we catch it, we bring it back. And oftentimes, unfortunately, it wanders away and stays away for half an hour before we realize that we've just been daydreaming and thinking of all kinds of other things. And then time for our meditation is over and we get up feeling unfulfilled because most of the time my mind was just thinking about other things. But that is the practice of dharana, sitting and trying to fix the mind on one thing. And we find that the mind is used to running wild, being free, but free in a lower sense. That is, free to do anything that it likes without any discipline, without any control, without any focus. And so that is not a healthy state for us or for the mind. That's because of the mind's present degenerate state. When the mind is highly purified, highly refined, we find that the true nature of the mind is to stay focused and to go towards higher things, towards spiritual things. That's actually the true nature of the things. So that is its natural state. Our state right now, where the mind is in a state of kshipta state, K-S-H-I-P-T-A, kshipta state, meaning a distracted state, that has become apparently natural to us because that's where we always find ourselves. But that is because of the abuse of the mind, not because the mind has attained to its natural state. And so when we try to focus the mind, the first thing the mind does is run away. The two things that the mind does when we try to hold it to one place, one thing is run away and think about other things, randomly just stream of consciousness. The other thing is to fall asleep. So those are the two big obstacles to meditation. Running away in a rajasic state, a state of rajoguna, or falling asleep, falling into a tamasic state. The sattvic state is to stay fixed on where we want it to be, the state of clarity, where we say, I want to meditate on this, we put the mind there and it stays. So concentration, dharana, means bringing the mind back and back again and again to the same point as often as I need to. But again, the nature of the mind is to run away, to bring it back, to run away, to bring it back, to fall asleep, to alert myself, wake myself up and bring it back. So continually to do that. So people wonder, well, Swami, when I try to meditate, I try to concentrate, the mind just goes all over the place. And sometimes for most of the session, I'm thinking of other things without even knowing it. And then I see the time is up and I've hardly meditated. Even then, do your practice. Even then, you're getting good from the practice, because you have at least made a samskara. That is, as we saw the first day, yesterday, in the first session, that is a mental impression. You've made a mental impression, and it's the repeated impressions of the same type that form a habit. And so you're forming a habit of sitting for meditation, of saying that whatever else I have to do, this is like brushing my teeth. No matter how busy I am, I still manage to brush my teeth. No matter how busy I am, I still manage to eat something, maybe quickly, maybe haphazardly, but I manage to eat something. And so I'm forming a habit of, no, this is as essential as eating, as essential as going to the restroom, as essential as the other physical needs that we have. I have to do this, I have to do it daily. And so whether the mind is controlled or uncontrolled, I come back, sit down and try. Remember the Gita's teaching, karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana, in verse 47 of chapter 2. Yours is the right to the work alone, never to the fruits of the action. That is the basic principle of karma yoga, which applies to all of the yogas, including Raja Yoga. So when I'm doing practice, mine is the duty to do the practice. The fruits, that will come in time, that's not in my hands. That is the grace of God or the grace of nature, whatever. But mine is to do the practice. So even if it feels useless, it's not useless. Something good is happening, even if the mind spends its time daydreaming. Not that we want to do that. We continually try to come back from daydreaming. But even if you're not successful at it, keep doing it, because that's the only way to succeed. So dharana is bringing the mind back again and again and again to the same point. Then we come to the second sutra of the third chapter, tatra pratyayikatanata dhyanam. So tatra, that is, when you have fixed the mind through concentration on one point, pratyaya eka tanata, that is, the mind is restricted to one thought continuously. That is dhyana. So dhyana, or meditation, technically means when through concentration you put your mind on the subject of or the object of meditation, suddenly the mind just stays there, and there's a continuous flow of thought towards it. Now, in this practice of meditation, there's still the will involved. You're still trying to hold the mind there, but you were doing that before in the dharana, concentration, but the mind kept running away even though you tried to keep it there. One day, you find suddenly you put the mind there, and unexpectedly, the mind stays. It's just there. And after a little while, the mind again runs away. But for some time, the mind is steady. It's quite a different, a unique experience. Just to have the mind stay where you put it, and just a continual flow towards that. And you're beginning to forget about other things, just that continual flow. That is meditation. So again, when most of us say, I'm going to meditate, what we mean is, I'm going to try to concentrate. But eventually, real meditation comes when you put the mind there and it continues to flow that way. That's what we're aiming towards. So it's important for us to know now what we're aiming towards, so we know where we're going and how to get there. It's by knowing the distinction between that state of meditation and my present efforts at concentration that I know where I'm going and how to get there. That is by putting the mind there and trying to get it to stay as long as I can. And one day, it just seems to be almost, it's not quite spontaneous, but almost spontaneous, where the mind stays where it is supposed to for some time. So that's the state of meditation. Then we come to the third stage, Tadevartha matra nirbhasam swarupa shunyamiva samadhi. So in the state of samadhi, so you first have concentration. The mind keeps running away, you bring it back. It runs away, you bring it back. Then meditation, dhyana. You put it there and it stays for some time, but then again it falls away. But samadhi is tadeva artha matra nirbhasam. When you put the mind there, you go start to concentrate, then the mind comes to meditation, it stays in meditation, and then suddenly the meditation goes deeper to there's a quantum leap between dhyana and samadhi. They're qualitatively different. It's not just quantitative difference, it's a qualitative difference in the state. Samadhi is a spontaneous state, which is tadevartha matra nirbhasa. The object of your meditation alone remains. That alone is there. Everything else disappears. So say if typical of the type of meditation many in our tradition do, you're meditating on a deity or on Sri Ramakrishna or the Holy Mother. And so you're visualizing their form. Suddenly that form alone remains. The form that you're meditating on, which you were trying to create with your mind, trying to visualize, suddenly that comes almost to life and it's there, and that's all that you see. And swarupa shunyamiva. Your concentration is devoid of the sense of being something separate from the object. Swarupa shunyam, empty of self-nature. So it's as if your concentration, your consciousness becomes united with that which you are concentrating on. So whether you're concentrating on a black dot painted on the wall and you're just concentrating on that, or you're concentrating on a candle flame, or you're concentrating on a visualized flame within your heart, or you're concentrating on a mantra, or concentrating on a deity or an incarnation like Sri Ramakrishna. Suddenly that form remains steady. It doesn't go anywhere. And you don't have the feeling that, oh, there's Sri Ramakrishna. I am meditating on Sri Ramakrishna. No, that sense of I and Sri Ramakrishna there, that disappears and there's just the object. So it's not the non-dualistic state, not yet that, but it is a state where you don't have the sense of, I am concentrating on this. There's just the object alone, and because that's a spontaneous state, it's not something which is under the control of the will, you don't have control over how long you can stay in that state. That is controlled by your own karmic samskaras, unconscious samskaras, mental impressions. A time will come when that concentration is broken. And so then you come back to it another day and try for the same. So in the beginning, the first time you experience actual meditation, that may come for a minute or two and then disappear, and it may be months or even several years before you get it back. But because you've had a taste, you keep trying to come back. You have now something tangible to aim towards because you've experienced something. And you keep trying to come back to that. Finally, a time comes where that comes back more and more easily, and then you can, that becomes easier of access. Your usual state is to go into meditation for some time. But then a time comes when there's, again, this qualitative leap, when suddenly you begin meditation, your mind is flowing continually towards the object, and then it's like your consciousness fuses with the object. And the object alone shines within your consciousness. And there's no sense of me being a separate person who's meditating on that. So that is samadhi. And samadhi, as Patanjali shows, has several different levels. We won't go into that because there's not time. And let me again check how much time I have now. It's until 2:10. Okay. So I still have a good amount of time. Good. So that is dharana, concentration, dhyana, meditation as a state, and then samadhi as a state. So concentration is an effortful endeavor. We try to concentrate. Meditation, it suddenly happens, but still it's supported by the will. If we don't try to keep the mind there, then the meditation breaks also. So it's almost spontaneous, but there has to be the support of the will. Samadhi, then the will disappears. It's a spontaneous state. So Sri Ramakrishna, in one of his wonderful analogies, which were all based on his direct experience, he says that before a play begins in a theater, then people are sitting around talking, oh, what a beautiful hat you're wearing. Oh, I like your dress. Oh, I like this. What were you doing yesterday? And all of the silly social conversations that we make sitting in the audience. The curtains are down and nothing has started yet. And so we're chit-chatting. But he says that as soon as the curtain rises, then everyone's attention is fixed on the stage like that. You know, so you're talking like this and talking to other people and all of that, but then suddenly your mind is fixed on the stage. And so that, he says, is like samadhi, that before that, the mind is distracted, like in concentration, we put the mind there, it runs away, put it there, it runs away. In meditation, we put it there and it stays for a while, continually flowing, but then it breaks away. But when the veil lifts and we enter samadhi, then suddenly the mind is fixed like this. So samadhi is, again, a spontaneous state. That's why among the Christian mystics, they of course didn't have the same terminology, but they speak of infused states of prayer. That is, states of prayer which are attained by grace only. That is, they're not under the control of the will. Other states of prayer you practice with the help of the will. But there's a state beyond the effort of the will where it happens spontaneously. That is, in Christian terms of prayer, those are the stages where prayer turns into what we call samadhi, a spontaneous state which is not under the subjugation of the ego and the will. It happens from the state of samadhi is suddenly opened to us from the other side, from the side of samadhi, not from the side of the ego, which is trying to go up, but from the side of samadhi, it's opened to us. And so that's why it's experienced in the various yogas as a state of grace. In bhakti yoga, the grace of God. In the jnana yoga, the grace of the self or the grace of the guru, which eventually are seen to be the same thing. And in yoga, it can be the grace of God, because again, the Ishvara Pranidhana, surrender to God, is taught, or the grace of the guru, or the grace of the Purusha, the true self. But something has to open from the other side, because the ego can't, the limited ego can't break into that. So our struggle, our self-effort, all of that is important, because that prepares the mind, the nervous system, everything else, without which the higher revelation is not going to happen. But the actual opening of it, that we can't predict when it will come, because that's not under the control of the ego. So those are the stages of meditation. And again, I won't go into the stages of samadhi, but let me say a word about 3 categories of meditation. So I'm stepping out of the Yoga Sutras for a moment to talk about the 3 large categories of meditation. And as I will explain, one of those categories is the typical yogic meditation. So one type of meditation is mindfulness meditation. No, let me start from another one and come to mindfulness last. It'll make more sense, even though it's a more preliminary type of meditation. In meditation, you have the meditator. I am meditating. The object of my meditation, I'm meditating on this, and the process of meditation. I am meditating on this. So you have meditator, meditated object, and the process of meditation. So in yogic meditation, the Patanjali Raja Yoga typical meditation is object-oriented. It's the object which is meditated upon. So I take a black dot or some other colored dot, like in the Buddhist Kashina exercises, or I take the candle flame, or I take a golf ball or ping pong ball, or I take the image of a deity, or I take a mantra, something internal, external, something visualized, something auditory, a feeling, a bhava, a feeling, something that I can focus on, hold in the mind, and try to hold that alone. So it's I meditating on this object. That is the typical yogic meditation. Then there's the typical meditation of jnana yoga, the path of knowledge, where you are practicing nididhyasana or atma vichara. There you are, as Swami Atmarupananda explained with the Dashamas Tomasi story, thou art the 10th. You turn your attention back this way. So you're not meditating on an object. You don't take any object. You're trying to turn your attention away from every object and pull it back into awareness itself. Pull it back into the subjective self, to pull the mind back to the subject. So yogic meditation is object-oriented. Jnana meditation is most often subject-oriented, trying to pull into the self. It can also be object meditation if you meditate on a symbol of the self. But actually meditating on the self, you're trying to pull back into awareness, so subject-oriented. And mindfulness is neither object-oriented nor subject-oriented, but process-oriented. That is the dhyana itself. You try to remain as just a field of awareness. You don't pay attention to any object. You just remain aware, open, and whatever comes into the field of awareness, you let it come and you let it go. You don't hold on to anything. You don't follow any train of thought. You remain as the still field of awareness. So you're not pulling back into the subject. You're not going after an object. You just remain as a field of awareness. And so usually in that practice, you have to restrict the area of your awareness in the beginning in order to get a feeling for it. So they do things like they focus on the breath entering and leaving the body. As Swami Atmarupananda did yesterday, you can like feel the coolness of breath as it enters your nostril and then as it leaves your nostril, and just be aware of that. Again, it's not object-oriented because you're not trying to awaken the breathing or to realize the breathing or anything like that. It's just to restrict your field of awareness to that. And so you just watch the breath coming and going, coming and going. And whatever other ideas and sensations come to the mind, you just register them and let them go. You don't follow any train of thought. You just remain aware and watchful. So that's mindfulness. All three forms of meditation are very helpful. As I explained in the last session, mindfulness can be seen as pratyahara, as training the chitta to remain in itself, because I'm just remaining as a field of awareness, not following anything, not allowing myself to get caught by a train of thought. Some idea comes into the mind and something within me finds interest in it, and suddenly I'm following this train of thought, and I forget what I'm doing. No, in mindfulness, you try to stay there. So these are the three big categories. And so the typical yogic meditation is taking an object of meditation and focusing on that. Why? As I explained yesterday, by taking an object of meditation and focusing on it, the yogic goal is not to realize the object. The object is only used in order to bring the rays of the mind into concentration, as I explained yesterday with the analogy of the magnifying glass. You catch the rays of the sun, which are already falling. With the help of the magnifying glass, you bring those rays of light to a point, and then you can set paper or leaves, etc., on fire. You haven't brought anything new. You've only concentrated that which was already happening. And so in concentrative meditation, you're just bringing the natural rays of the mind, the natural energy of the mind, you're bringing it to a point so that the mind becomes powerful. And through that, the mind becomes powerful, it becomes purified, and eventually it gains the strength needed to pierce through the veil of ignorance, to bring the mind into perfect concentration so that you can see the distinction between myself as pure consciousness and the mind as that where consciousness falls and becomes distracted through the senses, etc. then you attain to realization. So again, that is the purpose of object-oriented meditation, yogic meditation. The purpose of mindfulness is just to awaken the awareness itself. And the great virtue of that type of practice is that you don't have to imagine anything. You don't have to have power of visualization or anything. You're just watching that which is already happening and attaining the power of paying attention. That is a great help as a preliminary to higher meditation, because what happens when we try to meditate, when we try to concentrate, as I said, we put the mind there and then it spins away. We bring it back, it spins away. If I've developed the power of just paying attention, then from that I go from mindfulness practice to concentrative yogic meditation. Then I find it's much easier to keep the mind there on the object of meditation, because I've practiced keeping the mind attentive and not allowing it to follow trains of thought. And in subjective meditation, of course, you're trying to pull back into the self, into awareness itself, to identify with the Atman, which is Brahman. So these are the three categories of meditation. Now let me go to several meditations that Patanjali gives. And let's see, that's Shandilya, here are the Yoga Sutras, chapter 1. Yes, so here, it's 136. Vishokava Jyotishmati. He says that one object of meditation can be to visualize a light within the heart, which is let's see, where did it go? 36. Vishoka, without sorrow. To see a light to visualize a light within the heart, which is free from sorrow. Now that we can take for our own meditation, our guru-given meditation, if we're asked to meditate on a deity, to think of the deity as luminous, but with a light that is free from sorrow. Where is our sense of self? Our sense of self is here in the heart. That's why when, if I do something, I say I bake something and people eat it and say, oh, this is so delicious, who made it? I say, oh, I made it. I don't say I made it, or I made it, or I made it hitting my leg or something. I say I made it. Because spontaneously I recognize that my sense of self is located here. So whatever I visualize in the heart, I'm replacing my ordinary self-image with an image of divinity. And so I'm changing the very sense of self by meditating on something here. So if I meditate on a sorrowless light in the heart that is illuminating, say, a deity, it can be just a light or a light illuminating the deity. Then that gives me the sense that there's a space within me which is sorrowless, which is sinless and sorrowless. And so it begins to change my sense of identity. Then he goes on, Vitaraga Vishayam Va Chittam. Another meditation is to meditate on the heart of a great soul who is free from attachment. And so if we meditate on a Ramakrishna, a Holy Mother, a Jesus, a Buddha, a Shiva, a Kali, a Krishna, what we're meditating on is a being whose heart is free from attachment and hatred. And so we're meditating on the heart of a free soul. And so that also colors our own heart, because we're meditating on them within our heart. So that is a type of meditation many of us do. Then Swapna Nidra Jnana Lambanam Va. Or we can meditate on the knowledge, special knowledge, which comes in a dream or in deep sleep. So in a dream, some dreams are just reprocessing of mental junk, mental experiences and things that we've had. And it has its own purpose, but there's nothing special about them. But sometimes we have a dream which is actually a revelation, a higher dream where a spiritual truth or a spiritual being comes to us, a Ramakrishna, a Holy Mother, our Guru, comes to us and gives us some instruction, or we're given a mantra in a dream or something like that. And so one form of meditation is if you have a dream which is a spiritual revelation, which come to us once in a great while, then you can meditate on that. Take that as the object of your meditation. So many people, when they come to me and say that, Swami, I had this wonderful dream, I don't know the meaning of it, I tell them oftentimes that The meaning of it is not important. Meditate on the experience of the dream. Think about that over and over, because the meaning will go deep into you through the thinking of the dream itself. Just think of the feeling that you had as you saw this wonderful dream. Or if a person has a spiritual experience, sometimes even in the beginning of our spiritual life, we get a glimpse of something. It doesn't mean that we're better than other people. It just means that for some reason we've received this unusual grace to have a glimpse. Then we can meditate on that also. Or the knowledge which comes in deep sleep. There, it's just meditating on the absence of all thought and yet the experience of bliss. We wake up from deep sleep and say, oh, I slept so beautifully. I didn't know anything. It was wonderful. So just meditating on that sense of the absence of all things, absence of all thoughts, but the sense of great happiness. So that becomes the object of our meditation. And then he says, Yatha bhimata dhyanadva, or meditate on whatever appears to you as good. So that's good advice, to meditate on that which appears to you as good and worthy of meditation. So now my time is up, and we'll turn to question and answers. Or actually, we'll take a couple of questions, then I'll give you a very simple meditation to end with. But to sum up what I've said, there are three categories of meditation: the mindfulness type, the yogic type, which is object-oriented, and then the nididhyasana type, withdrawing into the self, subjective meditation. And there are three levels of meditation. If you take the objective meditation of Patanjali, and that is dharana, or concentration, where you fix the mind on a point, on an object, then that turns into dhyana, where there's a continuous flow of the mind for some time towards that object. And then that deepens into samadhi, which is qualitatively different. It's a spontaneous state which is open from the other side to us. And suddenly we find that the object alone shines, everything else disappears. There are no other conflicting thoughts. Just that alone shines, and we don't even have the feeling that, oh, look at that. Here I am meditating, and look what appeared. Isn't that nice? No, none of that. There's just that in complete silence, but with the experience of great joy of that awakening. So let me take a couple of questions, and then I will give you a guided meditation, a simple guided meditation.
Maharaj, we have a couple short questions with short answers here. How can one differentiate between the witness and the mind's own self-reflection?
Yes, that's a very good question. That's dealt with both in yoga and in Advaita Vedanta, because, again, that distinction between the self, which is pure awareness, and the mind, which catches the reflection of awareness, that distinction is important. And so there are different Advaitins and different yoga commentators who have described this differently, the practice of witnessing. But basically, I think it has to be considered obvious that when we begin the witnessing process, we're not actually standing in the Atman watching the mind. It's a higher part of the mind watching a lower part of the mind. It's the light of awareness which is reflected in the individual mind and the buddhi of the mind that is watching the lower mind. So it's the light in the buddhi which is watching the lower mind. Actually, realizing the infinite Atman is a big step above that, but this is a major step towards that, and so very important to practice. Why do I say that that should be obvious? Because when I'm witnessing, I don't see that I'm witnessing all of the minds in the universe. I see that I'm witnessing my mind. And so I'm still operating from the standpoint of the individualized consciousness. And so that is still good, because the sense of I am comes from the reflected consciousness, the individualized consciousness. But that, which is often considered the obstacle, the individualization is considered the obstacle in spiritual life. No, it's actually the window into the infinite. By coming back, withdrawing back to that sense of I am in the individualized consciousness, then it becomes just one more step to realize that this is really just a reflection of the infinite, and then you can shift your identity to the infinite. But first we have to come back to the individualized consciousness, and that's why Ramana Maharshi said so often in his teachings to hold on to the sense of I am, because that sense of I am is located in the buddhi, and that is where you're practicing Sakshi Chaitanya. But there's the ultimate witness, which is the real Atman. And so that's where we want to go, but this is a stage towards that.
Okay,
so
the
another
next
question.
What is the best way to eradicate samskaras? Can you shed light on the Vipassana technique with regards to this?
Yes, there are a variety of things that help us with samskaras. The basic thing in yoga that's taught is that the samskaras are in different states. And so we want to reduce them to what is called tanu state, the subtle state. And that we do by not feeding into them. And so, and I'll come to Vipassana in just a moment, but this is the basic thing, that we want to reduce the samskaras to a tanu state, to a subtle state where they're not raging and active and dynamic, because then we have to wait until spiritual experience actually burns those samskaras. And then they can no longer, we've transcended them. They're no longer capable of sprouting like a burnt seed. And so nirbija samadhi is what aims to do that. Through this illumination, powerful illumination, the seeds of the samskara seeds are burnt and they can no longer sprout. Until then, what we do is to bring them to a subtle state. And in general, there are many more specific things I could say, but there's not time. In general, what we do is to not feed the samskaras. That includes things like, I do something wrong. I know it's wrong, or maybe I make a mistake that I didn't know I was going to make a mistake, but we make a mistake by accident. And I feel terrible about it, either because I did something wrong or because I made a mistake, which one is intentional, the other is unintentional, but I feel bad because of either one, it doesn't matter. And I go on thinking about it. I go on regretting it. I go on feeling so bad that I did this. What am I doing? I'm strengthening it. I'm strengthening it. That's why Swami Vivekananda said, don't repent. Don't repent. In his typically strong, virile way, he said, spit if you must, but don't repent. That is, and he also said at other times, spit out your actions. Once you've done them, be done with them. That has to be understood. That doesn't mean that you don't learn from your mistakes and you don't recognize when you made a mistake. Yes, if you make a mistake, recognize you made it. If you have to admit it to someone, but then let it go. Because if you go on dwelling on it, you're only strengthening it. And so with desires, the more you think about an object of desire, the more you feed that object of desire in your mind, the stronger it gets. And so bring your samskaras to a subtle state. And Vipassana, it does that by training you not to follow the trains of thought. I'm sitting there in meditation, I'm trying to keep an open awareness, an open field of awareness, let things come and let things go, I don't attach to them. That is helping to bring the samskaras to a tanu state. But what happens in the beginning of our mindfulness meditation until we have advanced is I'm sitting there trying to hold an open field of awareness, and I hear the electricity kicking on in the refrigerator in the kitchen. And that suddenly reminds me, oh my God, I've got to go shopping. And let's see, I've got to get milk today, and I've got to get eggs, and I've got to get, so I need some fruit and things. Let's see, shall I go to H-E-B or shall I go to Kroger? I don't like that H-E-B store. Kroger, our Kroger store is much nicer. And then after that, let's see, I've got to go to this. And you see, you're going from thing to thing to thing. You're supposed to be staying here with an open, alert mind, not following any train of thought, and you followed one. So by training yourself to remain here without following the thoughts that are continually trying to hook into your mind and carry it away, you stay here, you're letting your samskaras come to a tanu state. So I'll stop with that now and let me give a guided meditation. Let me first see how much time I have until 2:30. That's only a little over 10 minutes, but that's enough. Because this is a simple meditation. It's actually a Chinese Buddhist meditation, but it's one I've done a lot. It's very, very helpful. It's very simple. It has no inspirational value whatsoever. So if you meditate on Sri Ramakrishna or Jesus or Buddha, then you feel the inspiration of meditating on this great soul. This has none of that. This is pure technique. But the value of it is that it gives you instant feedback on whether you are concentrated or not. It's a practice which is recognized in the Chinese Buddhist tradition, and I also recognize it as one that is a little bit mindfulness and a little bit object-oriented concentration. So you're developing both abilities at the same time. And it's a wonderful technique just because oftentimes in meditation, after we're finished, we're not sure if we were actually meditating or was I just sort of daydreaming or sort of half asleep. I don't know. With this, you know immediately whether I'm concentrating or not. So let me describe it, and then we'll do it in a guided way. What I'm going to ask you to do when I come to the instructions is ask you to breathe in and out, which hopefully all of you know how to do. And then you have to count from 1 to 10 exhalations. So that means 1 to 10 cycles of breath, but you count on the exhalation. And there's a reason for that I won't go into now. But you count from 1 to 10 on your exhalation. And hopefully all of you can do that. And so if that were all there were to the meditation, it wouldn't be much of a meditation because everybody can breathe and everybody can count from 1 to 10. The problem is, what makes it a practice is that as you're counting from 1 to 10, as you're focusing on the breathing and the counting of the breath, whenever the mind goes away and thinks about other things, leaving the counting of the breath, then you have to start over at 1. Begin again. And many of you will find it's hard to get beyond 1 or 2 without the mind running off and thinking about other things. And so without frustration, without getting upset with yourself or frustrated with the exercise, calmly, when you realize the mind has gone away thinking of other things, bring it back to counting the breaths. And it runs away, calmly bring it back. And eventually you will find that you can keep it there from 1 to 10. And that's a wonderful thing when you find that now I can, most of the time, I can get to 10 without a break in my awareness of the breathing. So let's do it as an exercise. Listen to what I say and then follow at the end of each instruction. First, take 3 deep breaths, breathing in deeply, exhaling completely in order to calm the body and mind. Now I'll send out a brief prayer for the welfare of all beings, just a simple intention for the prayer for the welfare of all. And now the practice. I'll start with simplicity, and then I'll add a couple more instructions gradually to hopefully clarify the instruction. But first to start with it in its bare simplicity. As I said in the introduction, breathe normally. You're not trying to control your breath. This is not pranayama or rhythmical breathing. Just breathe normally, and on each exhalation count from 1 exhalation up to 10 exhalations, meaning 10 cycles of breath, counting on the exhalation. But during that process, if you find that the mind has left the focus on the breath and the counting of the breath to think about other things, stop, bring it back, begin again at 1, coming to 10 only if the mind is continuously aware of the breathing and the counting of the breath. Now, as you do this exercise, again, I'm not breaking the meditation, we'll continue, but this is an added instruction. As you do this exercise, one of the things you find is that thoughts are bubbling up all of the time. So how are you ever going to think only of counting the breath and focusing on the breath itself? You don't have to do that. What you want to do is to keep the breathing and the counting of the breath in the center of your awareness, and let stray thoughts, sensations in the body, sounds, all of that, let them arise in the periphery of your awareness. That is, don't try to not hear anything, not feel anything, not think anything. Try instead to keep the center focus of your attention on the breathing and the counting of the breath, and let other thoughts and perceptions, let them arise and disappear on their own. As Swami Atmarupananda used to say, a stray thought or a perception comes to your mind while you're trying to do this, just tell it figuratively that, look, I'm busy with something else now. You come, sit down, have a cup of tea, and go when you're ready, but I can't entertain you now. I'm doing something else. And so with all of your thoughts and perceptions, let that happen. Just keep the focus on the breathing and the counting of the breath. So turn back to the exercise. One more addition, one more suggestion, and that is, as Patanjali says in the first sutra of the third chapter, the concentration is fixing the mind in one place, an actual place, a space. And so in this, to watch your breath and to count the breath, the mind is very spatial, just as the body is. And so in meditation, you need a place to fix the mind. So it's helpful here if you fix the mind someplace like the entry of your nostrils as you breathe in and out, where you feel that cool touch of breath coming in and leaving the body. Keep your awareness focused there and count the breaths. And now to close the meditation, bow mentally or physically to the way that, to God as you conceive of God. With the prayer, may the fruits of this meditation be for the welfare of all beings. So with that, I will close the meditation and this first session of the afternoon. So thank you for your attention.